Hello and welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff no fluff. I'm your host Kendra Losi, and I'm really excited that we're here. There's been some tech challenges, and you just never know what's going to happen, which is why it's live. But today we're talking about cannabis advocacy, education, making a big impact, and honestly just thinking higher. It's all important, and we're going to be covering it all. And joining us today is Tiara Sillet. I'm really excited she's here. She's from Cannabis Education Canada and has a vast experience in educating across different populations, different countries, and even working with the UN. So, welcome, Tiara. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here talking with you. I'm doing amazing today. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Now, before we get started, can you talk a little bit about what Cannabis Education Canada is and how you got started in the cannabis industry, especially as an educator? I think that's so important.
For sure. So Cannabis Education Canada is actually my most recent business. It is a international cannabis education company. Our goal with Cannabis Education Canada is to be able to provide education on cannabis, of course, but in multiple languages so that anyone and everyone will be able to have access to this education that is so necessary, especially for people who are consuming the plant. People need to know what they're consuming, how to consume it, why they're consuming it, why it was illegal, and now all of a sudden it's a legal product in Canada. So there's a lot behind cannabis, and there's a lot of things that people are not aware of. And my goal is really to just try to push that. I got started in cannabis initially, in 2017, actually. That was my first year that I opened a business. I had finished university in July and opened my cannabis vape lounge along with my wife in October. So it was a very, very quick thing, but
Very busy
it was
year.
super, super passionate about it. It was something that we really wanted to build a community. We wanted to build a space where people could, consume cannabis in a safe area, right? People were consuming outdoors. It was illegal at the time, so there was just a lot of stigma around it. So we wanted people to feel safe, but also comfortable and be able to ask questions like, how do I use this product? We used to provide like vaporizers and stuff, the volcano vaporizer, because it's one of the healthiest methods of smoking consumption, right? Is
Yeah.
vaporization.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where it started. I started doing course content for private colleges, and then that moved into me working with some places abroad when I did a cannabis inspired trip through South America. We did Argentina, Uruguay, and Colombia, and it was amazing. It was such an incredible experience that when I came back, I found a way with some of the people I was working with through the lounge to be able to get into working with Parkinson's Canada and like the MS Society, because a lot of patients wanted to know how cannabis could impact their life in a positive way, and it definitely, definitely can. So that's kind of where it all started for me, and from there it just moved into a ton of different forms of cannabis and education.
It's just so amazing. I was listening, and we have a few people watching, and Evie was saying that she loves that goal, creating that accessible cannabis education. And if you're watching and you have any questions for Tiara, please drop them in the comments. There's just so many things that you said that I want to break down because there's so many important elements. And I was like, okay, first of all, you're coming from Canada, which has very different rules than the US, where most of the viewers are. I'm not as
Yes.
familiar with some of the access rules in terms of can you where you can consume. So can you talk a little bit of like we're going to break this down into pieces here. Can you talk a
For sure.
little bit about the where cannabis is in Canada today? Obviously, it's
So
legal.
yeah, it's definitely legal. Some people like to call it Prohibition 2.0.
Ah,
Uh, went from a handful of laws to now multiple things that can be illegal around cannabis. So in certain aspects, I'm not gonna lie. In my opinion, some things have gotten worse.
mhm.
However, some things have gotten better, like the fact that the stigma has now gone down quite a bit in terms of when you see people using cannabis on the street, for example. You're allowed to use cannabis on the streets. It actually varies province to province. In Ontario, we are allowed using it on the streets. Of course, we can't use it like right in front of a business, similar to cigarettes. We can't use it in parks. We can't, in enclosed spaces. We're not allowed to use it. So vape lounges have kind of had to change their scene, and from indoor locations like I used to have, they're now doing like outdoor patio like
Right.
vape lounges, so that people are kind of like consuming together in the same type of community vibe, just outdoors now.
Which is great
So
except
some
for the winter.
yeah, it's brutal, and it's brutal in winter.
I was
That's
like,
the only
wait, we're
thing where
talking
we got like the
Canada.
heaters out and everything. It's a whole trip. But in terms of like the consumption aspect, I definitely feel like the stigma has definitely come down quite a bit, and there are more locations that people can consume. And obviously, it's not illegal to consume it anymore, which is like amazing.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of growing it, like right now in Ontario, at least we have 4 plants per household, not per person. So if you have 5 people in your house, you got 4 plants max. I mean,
Better hope
not
they're big.
amazing. And especially because in Canada, we have winter. So you can only grow a certain period of the year outside unless you have a whole indoor setup, which not everyone does.
Right, yeah.
So you have to only grow 4 plants and then hope that it lasts like your whole year. So it doesn't really make sense. It kind of forces you to buy through like the OCS, which is the Ontario Cannabis Store.
Hmm.
It's kind of like our middleman between licensed producers or license holders and the actual retail dispensary location. There's a lot of issues around that too. People don't like the fact that there is a middleman. It makes things more expensive.
Yeah.
And in terms of quality versus pricing, we have a low quality to a very high price in terms of legal cannabis stores. And this is why the legacy market is still going very strong in Canada, because we have very high quality in the legacy market with obviously much lower prices
Right.
and no taxes. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different aspects around it, but I'm just hoping that we're getting to a future where things start to flow a little bit better, and we kind of start fixing all the little issues that we're seeing in this beautiful machine of cannabis legalization.
I hope so. It's amazing how many, not necessarily stops and starts, but it's amazing how many different rules and things they can put in front of like legal businesses, right? In California, some of the counties, it's almost 40% taxed, right? Like that's a
Oh
really
yeah.
high percentage. So of course the legacy market's doing quite well, right? The quality is good here and you don't have to pay 40% tax.
Not only that, but the marketing is a really, really big issue for cannabis companies. You cannot have a person of any kind. Like, as an education company, my original logo was a little bit different than what you would see currently.
Hmm.
It almost had like a Starbucks vibe to it with a character.
Yeah.
And I was talking to some of the people that I know in this industry in the legal market, and I was like, this is kind of what I'm looking at doing. What do you think about the logo? Give me some feedback. They're like, I love the logo. However, you cannot do anything legal on like any circumstance, or like no government is going to hire you to do anything because you have a character in your logo. And according to marketing laws, that's like giving vibes to children of smoke. I don't even know. The basis behind it doesn't necessarily make sense. But the marketing is a really big issue. There's a lot of companies that are legal and are really struggling to be able to promote themselves, because you can't promote cannabis consumption, right? So you got to find a really creative way to do so, and that has been causing a lot of problems for people in Canada.
It's funny you say that because once again, I'm in California, and when I talk to people in other states, they're like, "Oh, our marketing limitations are like 2 lines. Don't market to children." And it's
I
like two
wish.
things. And in California, it's pages and pages and pages. And so whenever I start to feel frustrated, I'm like, or whenever people start complaining too much, I'm like, "Go talk to Canada. Like, stop
Yeah,
whining. Go talk to the people in Canada trying to do it
we
because."
have it worse, guys. We got it way
Yeah,
worse.
yeah. I mean, not that you want to be in that position, but just like stop it.
Yeah,
Like, there's so many more limitations that you all up there are dealing with that it's just like it's hard. It's so hard. It's hard for people to do business.
yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
So, as an educator in the cannabis business, in the cannabis space, There's so many questions, and I'm constantly amazed at surveys that come out where people don't know the benefit. What is the endocannabinoid system, and what are terpenes, and what are these things that, being in the industry, we start to take very much for granted and just assume that if you've been consuming for any length of time, you know what some of the benefits are. You know what you can do. How do you address that from a baseline perspective? Are you primarily talking to people who don't have any knowledge, or who are already experienced and have a higher baseline where they kind of know already what to expect, what the effects are, from start to finish?
So there are different courses that I make for different target markets.
Okay.
Like there are courses for healthcare professionals, okay, and
Hmm.
practitioners, and then there are courses for people who want to talk to their children or to their parents about cannabis. So it really depends on the target that you're looking for. In terms of people who have not consumed cannabis at all, I go in with a very, very open mind, okay? And it's like, okay, you know nothing. I'm going to talk to you almost like you're very respectfully, but as you're a 6 year old, okay, and you don't know what you're saying, doing, consuming, anything, and I'm going to teach you from the bottom up how to know what it is you're using, how to identify what you're smoking, and how to properly consume it. And that's kind of like how I would start for somebody who has no idea anything related to cannabis. One of my favorite things that comes up, it doesn't matter if it's a new person, it doesn't matter if it's a seasoned individual. One of the biggest myths is the indica and sativa thing. Okay, people think it's in the couch. So indica creates a relaxing high,
Hmm.
and sativa is a super energetic and creative high. Now that's actually not correct.
Yes.
Indica and sativa are what really describes like the morphology, like the actual plant. How does it look? So if
Hmm.
it's a tall plant with really skinny leaves, it's a sativa plant. And if it's a very short plant with really fat leaves, it's an indica plant. What actually determines how your high is going to be is the terpenes, which a lot of people don't realize. The terpenes are very important to see if you're going to have a creative or an uplifting high. Something like, oh, there's my cat.
I love that. I
Something
love that. Just
like,
like drive by. Here's my
yeah,
cameo.
pay attention. But something like limonene, for example, okay, that is the scent that it produces, that lemons produce or
Hmm.
oranges, okay, very citrusy. Now, this specific terpene is extremely helpful in giving that sativa high, okay, very creative, very uplifting. You're gonna have a real feel good moment when you're smoking that. And then you have things like pinene, right? It's a more relaxing high, okay? It focuses more on like the head and the body and like how to relax all of that. And I've noticed that that is something that I love in terms of like my indicas. When it has a pinene terpene, I know that I'm going to get a more relaxing high, at least personally. But yeah, the terpenes are super important. And we do courses on that as well, learning the terpenes. How do you pair terpenes with certain foods or certain
Ooh,
drinks?
that's
And
good.
there's lots of things that terpenes can do to make cannabis a really, really, enjoyable experience.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because there are certain, and some of that gets lost in the edible world, right? Like, there's products where you can put them under your tongue and they'll dissolve, and it gets to you faster. And so
Yes.
more than once I've been like, "Ooh, creativity and focus. I have a lot to do." And then I take it and I literally like timbered on the couch and passed out for 5 hours. I was
Oh
like,
my God.
I had so much to do and it knocked me out. But it's
Oh
not
no.
necessarily, the effects of that, to your point, aren't necessarily that it said, "Oh, here's the indica, I'm sorry, here's the sativa thing that it's going to do for you." It's that they should have had a better terpene mix for that particular product
Exactly.
for me.
Absolutely.
For me.
I definitely agree. And that's one of the things that some people when they're creating cannabis products are also missing, right?
Yeah.
Like you have full spectrum products, you have broad spectrum products. There's all these different things on the market right now, but a lot of them are missing terpenes, which
Hmm.
is like one of the main things. And this is when we talk about the entourage effect. is when we're consuming the actual plant and you have like that bud that has all the various cannabinoids in it, all the various, terpenes that you'll find in that specific plant. And it keeps that, it retains all of that. So when you consume that specifically, there is an entourage effect where you now have CBD, you now have CBN, you now have THCV, and there's all these different cannabinoids that have different benefits and different uses. And it's a much different experience than to just use a cannabis extract or a cannabis edible that only has one or very few of the cannabinoids available that are in the actual plant.
I'm laughing because I always, like, when I'm trying to explain it to someone who's never heard of the entourage effect, I'm like, okay, so if you go to a club by yourself, you're going to have a very different experience than if you go with your friends. You're going to have more fun
Yeah,
if you go with your friends.
that's, oh my God, that's a beautiful way of, of
How can
expressing
I
that.
dumb this down anymore for you? Like,
That's as good as it gets.
you're going to have fun if you go either way, likely. However, but
That's
it's just, and I think it's really important. And so here's what I see companies that I talk to running into, right? There is so much education for cannabis. Not even looking at, okay, one, you're getting people over the stereotypes and the stigmas around cannabis. And then you're looking at, okay, here's how the benefits, right? If you want to get into the endocannabinoid system, then here are the different CBN, CBD, THC, like, and whether we like it or not, then there's also the indica sativa hybrid. And then
Yes,
there's terpenes. Like, there's so many layers of information for people to wade
they're
through
really,
and that they need to be educated on.
yes, I
So,
100% agree with.
how do you help as an educator? How do you help people figure out what are the most important things to touch on when you're educating? Right? Because if
If
someone's brand new, you're not gonna spend 40 hours downloading everything into their head
Oh, absolutely
unless
no.
they're
And
asking
there's
for
way
it.
too much knowledge. I mean, up till today, I'm still learning on a daily things about
Oh,
cannabis because
yeah.
all the information's not out there yet. We still have a lot that we're going to be in the process of researching. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of your question, it's really about their goals. What is it that they are trying to achieve? Are they trying to get stress relief? Great. I'm going to teach you exactly what you need to know to relieve your stress. Are you trying to get insomnia relief? Amazing. Different situation, different different help for that. So, depending on what your goal is, we can really identify what the best route is to teach you everything that you need to know to have the best experience. Because our goal is to give you the knowledge that when you are consuming this product, you're not
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you're not feeling unsafe, you're not worried about what it is you're taking. You are comfortable and you know what it is you're doing. And that, when this happens, you take out so much paranoia, you take out so much of the anxiety that some people have as a relation with THC and like different edibles or even the smoking aspect.
Yeah.
So when you're able to learn and you know what it is you're consuming, that takes out a really, really big part of the paranoia and of all that stuff. So I just feel like for me personally, I try to help them look for what their goal is. And once you know what your goal is, it's much, much easier to figure out how to achieve that.
And and that's what we do with everything, right? Whether it's as a brand for business and you're creating it, whether it's personal goals, it's knowing what that is and then trying to help people reach that. And so it's the best approach possible that you could take. How do you can you talk a little bit about some of the work you've done with niche audiences in terms of different populations? So I know that you've worked with people who have who are suffering from different diseases or severe ailments. Can you talk a little bit about the work you do there? Because I think it's really, really important. And as more people are reaching, trying to reach whether it's some of the older populations or the veterans with PTSD and some of those other things, I think understanding how to reach some of those niche audiences is just critical because they're often the people that are suffering the most.
Absolutely. When it came to Parkinson's and like MS, for me at this point, I had already started on my education journey, like as being an educator and trying to teach anyone and everyone I could through my lounge.
Yeah.
I saw that, cannabis has specific uses for specific diseases as well, right? Whether it's glaucoma, whether it's Parkinson's, MS, all these different things have cannabis that can help impact it in a positive way.
Hmm.
And when I realized this, I was like, okay, if we are in the process of legalizing this plant, but on the medical side have not gotten to the point of getting every single disease group who could benefit from this to learn about it, we are doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we reached out to Parkinson's, and we kind of shared with them what it is that we were offering. They had no one that was offering them cannabis education at the time. And they used to have all these conferences, right? So they would just like fly me out and have me present to like a couple hundred people about, the endocannabinoid system, what even it is, because most people don't even know that we
Right.
have this
Yeah.
system. Most doctors don't know that we have this system. And that for me is
Crazy.
wild.
Isn't it crazy?
Like every mammal has an ECS, an endocannabinoid system, and the fact that a lot of people don't know that is something that definitely shocks me. So that was one thing that we would teach these people would be a little bit about the endocannabinoid system, how it works, where it's located, and how it kind of connects to cannabis. And then we would also teach them about various strains, whether
Mm-hmm.
CBD strains would be more helpful for them, THC strains, a little bit about dosing, because like when you're talking to beginners, dosing is extremely important.
Oh,
Start low, go slow, always. But for people who don't know that, who are going to a legal store right now, buying a gram of weed, rolling it up, and be like, all right, I'm just gonna smoke this.
I'm
What do
good.
you mean? No, you're gonna be on the floor. Please don't do that. So it's about teaching them a little bit about dosing and some of the side effects that they can expect to feel, see, hear, whatever during this process. We also tell them about the different methods of consumption that they could use, the different lengths. So for example, with an edible, if you're going to consume that, it takes about 40 minutes to an hour to actually work in your system. Some people don't realize this. They think they're going to eat it, it's going to happen right away. So when they don't, they eat more. And then they're
The
like, oh
worst horror
no,
stories.
I took too much.
It's always the edible
So
horror stories that people
it's
have like,
always the animal horror story. It's like, I didn't feel it. Oh no, you're going to feel it.
I don't feel
But
it yet.
yes, yes, that is the optimal word right there, is you have not yet felt it. But yeah, the different methods of consumption, how they can use it, how it will benefit them, how it will help with their specific goals. When it came to like Parkinson's, we knew what their goals were, what a lot of the goals were. It was like impacting their quality of life, so that day to day was a little bit better. They had a little bit more relaxation, a little bit less stress, a little bit less anxiety. And when in during that presentation, it was all about showing you the various aspects of how that can help with this specific goal. And that's kind of how I hit the niche aspect. It was really focusing on the goal as a whole, for what it is they're trying to achieve as a disease group, and then go from there and see how cannabis can be put into that, and really help them to make that work.
I love that. It's just so critical. Like I said, I mentioned earlier PTSD, and even it's funny actually because I have friends that are moms, and more than one of them has reached out to me, and like because they're brand new to cannabis or haven't used it in 20 years, it's very much the okay, I have to be careful who I ask because a lot of my friends are consistent users. So it's like, okay, because dosing depends on the person, right? I've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, the minimum's 10, but you'll want more than that anyway. Like, okay, well, this person's brand new. I'm not going to start them off. Like, I'm not going to recommend they start with 10 milligrams because that's probably not what they need right now.
Yeah, you start at 2.5, maybe 5 max to
Exactly.
start.
Exactly. But it all goes back to who you're talking to and what, if they're able to relate to that person who hasn't tried it before. Because the last thing you
100%.
want to do is start someone off with 10 and then be like, just keep going until you feel it. Like, that is terrible advice. Stop it. Put that over there. Because it's just different. Everyone has a different, they're coming from a different place. I love that your cat keeps making cameos.
He's a very needy, but he's this little tiny. He's actually not that tiny. He's a little chubby. He's a little chubby guy, but he's mute, so that's fabulous. He doesn't meow at all. He just kind of
Oh,
makes these little coughing noises at you when he tries to get your attention, or he comes up and taps you.
the most polite cat ever. Pardon me.
Literally.
Pardon me. I need some
Excuse me.
attention.
Your attention, please.
So, okay. because your cat's so cute. I also wanted to talk to you about just I think the international audiences. It has no relation to your cat, by the way, but
No, good.
but just redirecting over to internationally, right? So you're in Canada. You've presented all over South America, and just talk a little. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started with that? What different nuances between each country did you have to take into account? Because I think that just most people shy away when it comes to cannabis. Product people tend to shy away, right, because of all the different rules. And then education people who are focusing on education tend to shy away because they don't feel like they're really know enough about the different countries and the market and the
Yes,
culture, right? There's multiple things at play there. And I think I was just so curious about it when we spoke originally and
for
wanting to
sure.
learn more.
The way this actually all happened was I got really inspired with my cannabis research. And I was seeing that all these different countries use cannabis in different ways. They have, their preferences. Like if you go to the Middle East, you're going to see a lot of hash. They don't smoke the flower. Even if you go to like Jamaica at this point, like the actual good stuff is the hash. It's not the weed. They take all the trichomes, they make the finger hash, and then they have this beautiful fire hash,
You
but the
take
weed is pretty garbage.
that.
So for me, I was like, okay, what is it that like makes this a thing? What really brings about this culture and traditions of like around cannabis in these
Mhm.
areas? And my wife is from Venezuela. She has taught me Spanish. I taught her English, so it worked out great.
Perfect.
Now we both speak each other's languages, and when we went to South America, our goal was to see, okay, how does this culture consume cannabis? What are their preferences? Like, what types of cannabis do they prefer to use? Their methods, their strengths of their cannabis, because that's also a really big factor. You go to certain places and it's very low, the THC and CBD, and then you go to like Canada and it's like, oh yeah, 35% THC. That's awesome. Let's do it. But yeah, so it was just a lot of intrigue, I guess you could say. And so we booked a trip like a month after legalization, and we were doing Colombia, so Medellin in Colombia, Buenos Aires and La Plata in Argentina, and then Montevideo in Uruguay. Before we got there, we Instagrammed tons of people, tons of head shops, growers, everything you can think of. Instagram was our most amazing tool to find people and just start talking to them and see who responded. Turns out a lot of people responded, and it was really great. We ended up having a driver take us all through Medellin to all the cool spots, to where they get weed on the street, to get where we went to this Expo Medeweed where they had infused ice cream. We ate infused ice cream in Colombia. It was beautiful. It was amazing. Okay,
Oh,
I loved it. They have infused drinks. It was the first time I was able to experience land races, because those are very hard to come by. And
yeah.
in Colombia, they have very good land races. Now, land races are a strain that has not been genetically modified by any other strain. So, a land race that I really, really enjoy is Limon Verde. It's a sativa because it grows extremely tall in the wild, and it has a pretty decent THC percentage. It depends definitely on the plant, but you're definitely getting at around like a 15 at least
Yeah.
minimum is the what I've seen for that strain. And it was amazing. It was a great experience. And then we did different expos as we went along. And when we hit Uruguay, we met tons of people that were doing everything legally, because Uruguay was actually the first nation to legalize cannabis in the world. They did it the same year that they legalized gay marriage, actually. So 2013 was a very important year for Uruguay. And it was incredible to see some of the culture around it. When we went there, we actually stayed in an Airbnb that was a cannabis museum. So
Oh,
it was a cannabis museum that had space for an Airbnb. It was crazy experience. I don't even know how that happened,
that
but
is awesome.
very cool. They have this little like jungle space where they have all this like grow area, and then the museum is in the front, and they have like infused champagne, energy drinks, fettuccine, okay, like random things, and they're all infused, and it's amazing. So for me, I was like, this is like the highlight for sure. Like I can't
Oh,
believe I'm even
yeah.
seeing.
That's
And yeah, it was Argentina when we went back, because we went through Argentina twice actually during that trip. When we came back to Argentina, um, is where we met a lot of very important people in the industry
Mm-hmm.
that were the people who, like, we met a lawyer who was imprisoned for cannabis. And during her time in imprisonment, she became a lawyer and she started fighting for the rights of cannabis in Argentina. Now, through her, we started working with the United Nations through GMAF, which is Grupo Mujeres y Familia Argentino y Familia. So basically, it is a group of women who are working together to try to provide advocacy, and we work directly with the UN now to try to around the world showcase different issues that we're having with cannabis, whether it be through Canadians' cannabis legalization. We did a whole presentation thing for the Vienna meeting where we tried to express like what was happening in Canada, like the issues that we were facing in terms of marketing, in terms of lounges, in
Yeah.
terms of the fact that the medical patients are left behind when we are so focused over here on just like the recreational aspect, that all these people who are the backbone to the reason we have legalization today are all now suffering.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that we needed to bring to the forefront, and Argentina was a really pivotal point in our cannabis journey, because we were able to meet people who were on the same path, who are on the same path of advocacy and taking it to a global level. It's a group of amazing women and a doctor from Spain who kind of brings about like the medical aspect. We're the cannabis educators for like all of this, and it's just working together to try to find around the world how this can be a product that is used and benefited by like so many people, like, you know. And I think it's a really beautiful thing that this group has like existed and is creating these things. And we also, during this process, joined another confederation, a cannabis confederation that has partners all across the world. And it's about teaching people about cannabis. It's about showcasing what's happening in each country, in their various cultures, the laws that are being passed or that have been, you know, shot down, what we need to work on for the next time when we're going to try to re-promote this law, and a lot of stuff along the way. But it's basically a lot of people who just want to take it to a global scale and say, look, this is a product that is needed. It is a product that can be benefited by so much in so many different aspects. I mean, think of all the industries that we could have infused with cannabis: the food industry, the beauty industry, the gas industry. I mean, cannabis and hemp, they're incredible products. And I think that it needs to be pushed a lot more.
I love that. And once again, I still have like 47 questions from just that like story. I could listen to you talk about that trip just forever. So one of the questions I have is for the group that you're working with that works with the UN. Is that all women? Is that just an
Yes.
open group? What do you think? Okay, I was hoping you'd say that yes to that because my follow up question is what do you think it is about women coming from South America specifically, since that's where they're based, since that's where they're based out of, where it's women driving that forward?
So there was actually, so the people that I was working with in Argentina, we went down there to do like a mini documentary like thing as well. So we brought like our camera crew down with us, and
I would hope you
they
did
just,
because it's an
yeah,
incredible experience.
videotaped tons of stuff. You can see like little snippets of all the different areas that we went to on some of our Instagram accounts. We try to post like little videos about it, but when I met these people, one of the ladies started talking to me about how this women revolution kind of started in
Mhm.
Argentina. And it was actually a bunch of mothers who kind of got this started, because one mother had this story, and this one changed my whole life. I feel like I went into a form of advocacy more than ever after hearing this story. This mother had her child, and unfortunately, during childbirth, the umbilical cord was wrapped around the neck too long and took too much oxygen from the brain. So the child was born with liver issues, brain dysfunction, was on a respiratory apparatus, on 83 different medications daily.
83
And
daily?
yeah.
Oh,
And then within I think a few, like a month or so, they said, look, nothing's working. I'm sorry. You can take him home. He's gonna die like within the
Yeah.
month. Basically, they basically told her to take him home to die.
Oh,
So she went home, did research, and found something about cannabis oil. So she called her doctor and asked him about it. They hung up on her because it's illegal. So she's like over here, like, so you want my kid to die and you want me to focus on the legality of it? Like, I don't
right.
give a shit about if it's
Yeah.
legal or not. So she got it from a friend who was sourcing it from somebody else, and she got just a little bit of CBD oil. Within literally like 24 hours, the kid was looking at her. They have never made eye contact before. Never made eye contact. Started looking at her, was off the respiratory apparatus, down. He was having multiple seizures a day. He was down to like zero, like maybe one a week or something. It changed his entire. They told him that he was going to die within like a couple months, and he lasted. He was 3 years old when I met him at the interview, and he was fine and playful and happy. And
Oh
she's
my
like,
gosh.
my kid would have died if
Yeah.
I did not find this oil for him, and I will not allow a lot of other children to die from the same stupid shit when there is a solution.
Yeah.
Okay, so they started planting cannabis. They did all the research they possibly could to grow it. They started sourcing CBD heavy strains
Hmm.
because it's great for epilepsy. There's a lot of great things around CBD strains. So their goal wasn't to get high. Their goal was medical value for their children. So on top of that, they wanted very, very low THC because you're not trying to get a bunch of kids high. You just
Right.
want them to not have a million seizures in a day.
Right. The little things you
So
want them to live.
yeah, exactly. And so there's a whole like revolution of women, of mothers growing cannabis. And when this other lady, that Martha, she's an amazing woman. She's actually the lawyer that I'm talking about. When we met her as well in the same interview session. And after talking to these ladies and seeing what they do for cannabis and how they are changing lives every single day, I was like, we need to get our countries to work together so that we can do this on a grand scale.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
we all need to be working together for this. You shouldn't just be doing this in Argentina. I shouldn't just be doing this in Canada. We need to be doing this so that people who don't even think they have a chance for their country to even consider it knows about what is happening. They know about the plant. They can learn about it themselves without needing their government to be like, yes, you may use this. There's a lot of people around the world suffering.
Oh, absolutely. And I've heard a lot of stories like that from mothers around the US, right? Each state's different, each state has it, but it's usually been, and I'm not saying one thing's more important than the other, right? But I typically hear it related to epilepsy and it becomes a quality of life, not necessarily a
Yeah,
life or death, right? There's levels of severity.
absolutely.
But either way, no matter what it is, you're absolutely right. It's these pockets of mothers, and thank God for the internet because they are able to connect
Yes.
and find each other. And now once again, it becomes like, okay, we're here together in a state. Now we're here together in a country, and it just becomes bigger pockets, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you're being able to combine countries to be able to help with this, it takes it to a whole different level. And it's very, very impressive that the work that you and your wife have done around this, along with these
Thank
other
you.
women, to help move things forward. And that's, just even knowing a tiny bit of your story, I'm so glad you came on to talk about it because once again, like I still have 46 questions about that trip. But I do want to be cognizant of time, and I also want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you do and promote some of your education aspects and some of the other things you're working on, because I know that you have a million different cool things that you're working on that people are going to want to know about.
Absolutely.
So take it away.
Right now, currently, I'm actually in the process of creating a course completely dedicated to healthcare practitioners, people who are, in the hospitals and, doctors and all sorts of people who are practicing who really need this education. As I said before, the endocannabinoid system is not often taught in medical school. So
Right.
there's a lot of our doctors who are not even aware that we could be benefited buy cannabis. They think that it's just another drug, or they've been, they've fallen into the stigmas. And really being able to provide yourself with education is of such importance. I feel like going to doctors multiple times in my past for lots of various issues. I was in a snowboarding accident. They wanted to put me on Percocets. And thankfully, God bless, I had a doctor who really cared and was like, look, you have two options here. This is technically an option. You can do cannabis, but there's a lot of stigma around it, and I don't know how this is going to work for you. I picked cannabis for sure because I'd already done a ton
Oh,
of research at this
yeah.
point,
Yeah.
and changed my life. I'm not addicted to Percocets right now. I'm not, stuck on something that I would need to take on a daily basis, because it wasn't just like oh, here, take this for a couple weeks and you'll figure it out. No, this is like a daily thing. And when
Yeah.
you're working with daily things, how can you find a natural product that's actually going to help you? So we're really trying to get into the position of teaching these people who are kind of actually helping others about cannabis. Another thing I'm focusing on actually is CHS. A lot of people don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, very rare, but only like 3 to 5% of the chronic smoking population or chronic users can get this thing called CHS. It's basically where you vomit uncontrollably until you're in the hospital. And since most doctors don't know what this is, they may, take out your gallbladder, or they may, there have been some crazy surgeries that I'm like, I don't even know how you managed to get like a part of your body taken out, and it had nothing to do with that. So, um, CHS is definitely something that is now going to see higher percentages of people,
Mm-hmm.
suffering from this, because now cannabis is legal in multiple states, in all of Canada. And since there's so much we don't know, our goal is to try to push as much education about it that we do know out there, so that somebody picks it up and is like, hey, we need to research this, because some people think it's pesticides. Unfortunately, people who are, completely organically growing their cannabis are also getting it. So it can't be pesticides.
Right.
We can't just think it's cannabis from Canada because people from India are having it. People from Brazil have it. It's all around the world.
Yeah.
So it's not the type of cannabis, it's not the pesticides around cannabis. So what is it? We don't know. We think that it might be, your endocannabinoid system has been overworked from the amount of THC or other cannabinoids that you've been consuming, and maybe that's a thing. So it's just around finding things that I feel like people have not been educated on enough, or there's not enough information out there, and really turning it into something that is easy and accessible. We want to be able to provide courses that are going to be online, so that it is something that you can do from anywhere, the comfort of your
Right.
own home. A lot of my courses originally were more in person, like conferences or doing all that, but the pandemic has definitely helped shift that a lot and push us into the whole online sphere. So within like this year and the next year, you're definitely going to see a bunch of our courses being posted on Cannabis Education Canada, and you can find that at cannabiseducationcanada.com or on Instagram, and we'll have a lot of the information provided through there as we are moving along.
Fantastic. And I want to point out that all the education, because it's about cannabis, not necessarily about cannabis in Canada, it's relevant to all of us, no matter what country
Yeah,
you're in. No, thank
100%.
you so much. The last thing you just mentioned, your website. I know you have a couple Instagram accounts, Cannabis Education CA
Yep.
also.
Tiara Sillet, just my name. And then my wife and I, we do a cooking show. It's called The High Cooks. So if you search us up there, you'll be able to see us infuse lots of different meals. We try to showcase meals that are not super unhealthy. Like, we try to also provide gluten-free meals, vegan meals, vegetarian options. There are definitely going to be meat options as well for people who are looking for that. But we want to showcase that it doesn't just need to be gummies and chocolate that you're consuming your edibles with. A lot of people think, oh, I need to have a candy, but no, you don't. You can have a fully I infuse my salads with my olive oil.
Hmm.
So for me, it's like I can have super healthy meals with none of those added calories or sugar, and still be able to take my medicine, right? So for us, it's like showcasing that in a DIY form. We showcase how to infuse your oils and like your butter or whatever it is that you are using. Our favorite is olive oil, so you'll definitely find lots of olive oil recipes and versions on how to do it yourself, and also how to use like a magical butter machine or like a Levo machine, something that is like just it does it for you. But the DIYs are definitely more popular. I think people like to see what they can just go to the dollar store, pick up, and come back and do it real quick. So
Absolutely. And it's part of, especially in the past year, right? People have had a little extra time because they haven't been spending a lot of time commuting, going to events and everything else. So a little more
yeah, it was this year
flexibility.
that kind of brought the high cooks for us. Actually, we were both home a lot and we were cooking. We're like, I feel like other people could maybe potentially benefit from this. So let's just post it, and it's just basically all about me, my wife, and our cooking. So
Love it. Love it. I love all your energy and what you're doing. And all of the education work that you're doing is just so phenomenal. So I really want to
thank
thank
you.
you for being here today. Those of you watching, if you have any questions, be sure to drop them below. Add any, tag us and we'll make sure that we're responding and getting those answers to you. Just thank you so much for being here, Tiara. I really appreciate
Thank you
it. And
so much for
all right, we'll be back again the first and third Tuesday of every month. I switch my schedule around. And so I'm like, okay, first and third Tuesday of every month, 2 p.m. Pacific time. We will see you here next time. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.